All right. So recording is on. Again, we'll just get started with two things on the agenda, the FY25 budget and the future summit updates and next steps. So with that, I'll pass it on to Luigi to talk about the budget. Actually, just to mention that Hachman is the VP Finance, but he's actually in another meeting right now talking about the budget. So Luigi's going to do the presentation here.
Yes, I am Luigi Russis. I'm the Executive Vice President for SIGCHI, and let me spend a few minutes talking about the budget, and if you have any question about it, if we are able to reply, otherwise we will need to bring in our Chan for in details answer about those part. So just to put everybody on the same page, what is the SIGCHI budget? So basically, every year in February, ACM send an estimate on how much US dollar we have for the fiscal year, and we have two streams that brings money in the SIGCHI budget, and one stream that brings money out. Conferences, revenues, digital library downloads, and membership due brings money in, essentially. Conferences and EC expenses and ACM overhead takes instead monies out. There is this note on the estimate that the ACM send every year, because there is a rule in the ACM for every SIG, not just for SIGCHI clearly, that every SIG can actually, if they want, budget even more than they have, but with the condition that the SIG should have at least 50% of the planned expenses for the next fiscal year at the beginning. So if we plan to spend $200,000, we need at the beginning of the fiscal year in the bank account at least $100. That's the rule for every SIG from the ACM. And we are doing a budget here in February, but the fiscal year will start in July 2024. And so we are now budgeting for the fiscal year starting July 2024 until June 2025. And we are, let's say, using currently the budget that we created February last year and started June 2023 and will end in June 2024. So with that said, which are the expectation according to the ACM projection and the current expenses. So SIGCHI should have $3.7 million, and we can budget up to $7.5 million. And according to the budget, the incomes for the next fiscal year will be $8 million, and the expense, conference plus EC's expenses, that are the various programs that the SIGCHI has, and the various support tools for conferences, for instance, etc. And the overhead will take instead out $7.5 million according to the budget we just finished to create, and we submitted to the ACM for approval. So this is a presentation of a budget that DC fill out and approved, but not yet approved by the ACM. That will take some weeks before approving it. So where these millions of dollars went. So as you can see here, there are for the expenses. As you can see here, there are three, let's say, big bucket for expenses. One is the conference expenses, the money that conferences, the 26 conferences that SIGCHI has need to do their work, to happen, to pay for people, to pay for places, etc. Then that account for almost 80% of the entire budget of the SIG, since 26 conferences are quite a lot, as you can imagine. Then there is around 10% that is the overhead that the SIG needs to pay to the SIAM. And then the rest, around 13%, are instead the money that this year SIGCHI can spend for general expenses like travel, contracts for services, or for other areas of activities that are depicted here in the slides. Just to note that these areas are areas that we created for presentation here, for communication. These are not areas that appears in the budget. In the budget, everything is structured in terms of business unit and project unit and so ever. So this is just to explain to you the main the main points in which we are spending. So for instance, 50% of this EC budget is for supporting in various ways conferences. So the progressive web app, PCS, and events that are tools that the SIGCHI provides to all their conferences for free. The conference development fund, that are funds that conferences can ask money for. Community support, the general development grant, the Gary Marsden Travel Award, support for chapters, and support for regional committees to do their own activities. And then you can see others like accessibility, member benefits that includes interaction, production expenses, and Grammarly, some sustainability fund, award support for the awardee, the SIGCHI awardees every year. And then there is a 2% that is the president's discretionary fund, that is a sort of emergency fund, a contingency fund for unexpected expenses that might happen in the future. And this account for, again, this 30% that this year is for the program SIGCHI can provide, so $966,000, which is, with respect to last year, around half of the money we provided last year. And this is also due to some challenges that SIGCHI, but I think many SIGs have experienced, let's say, post-pandemics, including inflation, so everything is more expensive, including differences in participation in the conference, some more virtual participation, some more different ratio between student and non-student participation in conference, etc. Sponsorship, some unfortunate losses in a few conferences, and then there are new challenges like the SCM Open program that will kickstart in a while. And so the SIG has been doing well financially for years and is still not doing bad, but there is more attention to be spent, to be paid. As you can see in this graph, as you see along the years, the requirement of the CM is 50% of the expenses that we need to have at the beginning of each fiscal year just become closer and closer to the actual balance that we have. And so we cannot go over these requirements. We cannot spend more than the requirement. And so as these two bars, the blue and the yellow bar, becomes closer and similar in the graph, the less everybody in SIGCHI can spend. And conferences have clearly their sort of fixed expenses because they need to do operation things, they work. And so there is a reduction, as I said before, in the EC expense that are the program that SIGCHI can provide for the next fiscal year, because we need to not overspend and we need to stay within these requirements. And with that, I think I have say whatever I should have said for the budget. And if you have any question or something to add.
Please raise your hand or write in the chat. Minha?
I was wondering if you could explain the last bit a bit more about the open access.
Oh, well, this is something will impact every SIG and DCM. So basically, currently, one source of income is due to the downloads we get from the digital library for conferences. So for every downloads, every SIG get a percentage of money that DCM computes. When this model of DCM Open kicks in, that mechanism will change. We don't know yet exactly how that will change. So there will be some revenue coming in, but not, it's unclear how much, and it's expected to be less than what we everything get at the moment. And this will also, on a second and parallel point, have some implication for conferences, because according to who they are, their community, that could be impacting the participation and the submission to conferences. So if you are in a ACM Open covered institution, maybe it won't change much. But if you're not, and you have to pay $1,000 to send a paper, then that maybe can create a limitation in participation for some conferences. And this is something that will happen slightly in the future, but still it's a challenge for the SIG and for its conferences that we should all start thinking about and keep in mind.
Thank you.
No one has any questions. We had an animated discussion about the budget in the previous meeting. And we were discussing all the things that should go into the article that we write up. So any requests for what you'd like to see in the article?
I think the open access aspect just is a big interest on my part, because within specific European institutions, unless it is open access, we are not allowed to publish for specific grant schemes and research that is done under those grant schemes. So yeah, I would be curious to see how fast things transition. And of course, yeah, considering the financial aspects of that, I'm sure that I think in the future we'll hear more about it. So that would be just one aspect I would like to know more about.
Yeah, for sure. You and all of the SIGs, honestly, because we don't have yet any numbers on what the expectation is. The last figure that I had heard, like in August last year, was 4 million that ACM as a whole, or not the ACM as a whole, but all of the SIGs would be losing a total of 4 million. But the most recent estimate is that that's going to be larger, that it's going to be more than 4 million. So that gets distributed across the SIGs, but we are definitely one of the 3 or 4 largest SIGs. So it's going to impact us more. We'll talk about ACM Open more once we get to the next topic, which is the summit, and you know how we can be more prepared for it. I just want to make sure that everyone has a clear idea of what we're talking about here. So one additional piece of background I'll share is that I've been doing, this is in my role on the SIG governing board, I've been doing a survey across SIGs of all conferences across ACM that are led by SIGs. And we've seen about 40 responses so far. And this is also the survey, Alexander, that I was talking about. And what I've seen in the responses so far is that these are challenges all of the conferences are seeing, like all of the SIGs are seeing, that post-pandemic, there have been many changes to how they've been doing conferences. A lot of them have stopped doing hybrid, although there's still quite a few who say that they want to stick with offering hybrid support. There's challenges in terms of attendance. So pretty much all conferences have gone down in attendance. And that means that the budgeting has been off and conferences have been losing money. We certainly had a massive loss with Chi 23 on account of just, having to expand spending at the conference, and that's something that was unexpected. So each time we lose a bunch of money, we also lose the capacity to budget for the next year. So it's not just a linear thing, it actually hurts us. Luigi, that's right? Like it hurts us by double the amount.
Yes, around double the amounts, more or less. Or
Helena?
we should need double the money to compensate.
Yeah, it prevents, actually, Helena, go ahead.
Oh, I want you to finish your thought. I was just going to make a suggestion about another graph that might be really helpful
Okay.
for the
I thought you
write-up.
were going to talk about how losses. hurt
No,
us
you're
with-
right. But yeah, it's all related.
Yeah, so when we lose money, basically we trying to keep it simple. Basically we have to keep more money in the bank for the next year. And so that means that we don't have the money that was overspent, but also we can budget less in the next year. And when we are forced to do that, that impacts everything that we spend money on. Some of our big ticket items are community support and the tech support that we offer conferences through the PWA and the progressive web app for SIGCHI conferences, among other things. So those are the things that have to take a hit. So that's what you're seeing in the slide. And we've reduced, like, the president's discretionary fund, for example, was, I want to say, like, more last year, right? It was 60K or maybe even more. And that's gone down. And so across the board, we've reduced the funding, which is okay. I think we'll be fine. And this is, for 1 year, but we have to not sustain big losses. And that's our main concern for this coming year. And especially understanding where conferences are losing money and trying to prevent that from happening. I think that's very critical. So those of you who are here, who are representing conferences, I know Auto UI is here and Kui is here, Kai Play. So this is something that we're really absolutely worried about for the next year. Okay. So with that, should we go to the next topic, Luigi?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. So we decided to start on a more somber note so that we could end on a happier and more upbeat note. Initially it was the other way around, and then we decided this was actually better. So, all right. So what do we do about that, right? We talked about conferences. We talked about supporting conferences so that they don't lose money. And one thing I want to be clear about is that, it's tough to talk about the losses, because when you're talking about losses, it seems like we're pointing fingers at people who were in responsible positions when the money was lost. And that's not our goal here. If we're not honest about where the money is gone, where the money's gone from, then we're not going to be able to fix the problem looking ahead, right? So we have to be honest about where we've lost money. And we also want to be clear that that's where we want to focus our effort moving forward. So if conferences have been struggling on various levels, whether it's because of PACA-MHCI models, whether it's because of coming back from the pandemic, whether it's hybrid, whether it's site changes because of natural disasters, all of that has happened in the last year. And we want to see how we can support conferences moving forward. So for example, ACM just decided that there isn't going to be a conference in Israel. We're not going to be able to provide insurance. And so we have to be for the next year, we have to move a conference that was going to be held in Israel. So that's a difficult situation to be, right? Because if ACM says no, there's nothing that we can do in terms of the conference organization. So that will have to change. And obviously that's going to bring in some last minute issues, which may then lead to increased costs. So those are the types of things that, how can we actually prevent them? I don't know if we can, but we can definitely try to pool in our resources and be on the same page with everybody so that we can try to prevent some of that from happening. And in the interest of that, we held the summit last month, and the main goal was to kind of take a step away from all of the conferences, because many of us, we associate directly with a single conference or maybe two in the portfolio of SIGCHI conferences, but we don't necessarily step out and look at all of the conferences as a whole, right? So to take a systemic view, we did the summit. And we tried as much as possible to keep the conferences really kind of bottom-up, organic, on topics that were that felt important to the people who were attending, and created the structures where those conversations could happen. So hopefully the blog post kind of captures that, and that's the Scan Me that you see here, the QR code. There were 5, and I say 5, maybe 6 topics that came through as being really critical from the summit. And those are the conversations that we want to advance. So they were about ACM Open. So to your point, Menha, we need our conferences and our community members to know what's going to happen with ACM Open. We have some, we don't really have much of a remit to change anything there, but we can give feedback to the publications board about anything that comes up with conferences. And that's something that the survey that I just mentioned has raised already. I asked in that survey, where are you on a scale from 1 to 10 with regards to preparedness for ACM Open? And most conferences, most SIGs are actually at the 1 to 4, right? So quite low, and they don't know what this is going to entail. And that's really our job. Like, so Scott Delman shared this information at the summit, and what all of the SIG chairs have been asked to do basically is keep sharing that information with everyone in the SIG so people know this is happening. There are things we can do, for example, communicate with the libraries, the department chairs and such, to let them know that this is happening, to explain why it's happening and why open access is actually a desirable way to go. So there was actually a change.org petition that led to this timeline for ACM to change to 100% open access. And Scott also talked about the different transition, I guess the rates of progress across different countries. So for example, there are countries that seem very, very resistant to taking this on and to signing up for ACM Open. There are other countries that have been much more willing, but it's not a country by country thing necessarily. Like in the US, for example, it's not going to be a country by country thing. It's really institutions, and different institutions are going to be hit differently. And in India, apparently it's going to be more of a countrywide thing. So this is just to give you some examples that is going to hit different institutions, different countries, and also different conferences differently. And one of the examples from CNC, Creativity and Cognition, I can mention. So one of the program chairs or general chairs for the next couple of years had done the analysis of checking to see which in the past 3 years, what does it look like? So how many of the authors who had papers published over the last 3 years belong to institutions that have already signed up for ACM Open? And that's a useful analysis to do, right? Because you can get something of an idea of how much your community is going to be impacted, your conference community. And they found that it was roughly 50%. So there's still a long way to go. We have almost 2 full years before this starts to really hit authors. but as much as we can do on our part to encourage people to sign up, encourage institutions to sign up and share letters. So there's a letter draft that I had shared in the blog post on ACM Open some months ago that you can use to communicate with your departments to see where you are at with regards to this development. So this is, I'm talking a lot about ACM Open, of course. Pageman is not here. Okay, so never mind. But Pageman is VP Pubs. He's happy to take questions about ACM Open at any point. We talked a lot about peer review. This is something that impacts everybody who writes a paper, everyone who reviews a paper, and there were a lot of people who had thoughts on various aspects of peer review. So we're at the point where we're kind of pulling together all of those discussions and trying to move forward. So with regards to peer review, it could be about, certain topics that come up when you're reviewing. It could be about making reviews transparent. So there are some best practices that were shared along those lines. Minha, you mentioned today citational justice. So those are the types of conversations that have come up under peer review, and we want to advance all of those. On the conferences topic, it's mostly around knowledge sharing. And really it's about, the way that Jens Palsberg, who's a SIG governing board chair, puts it, he says, when there are crises, it's good to have a group of people around us who can support us, right? But if you don't have that group set up, then the amount of work that it takes to set up that group can be an inhibitor. So we're trying to create that kind of, a community advisory board for conferences, if you will. So just people who have been conference leaders in the past, who are currently leading a conference, or who want to be leading a conference in the future. This is really for you to learn from other conferences in the SIGCHI portfolio to see what are the pain points, how could we do better, maybe co-locate. So co-location is something that I just had a conversation about with some people at ACM, and to understand what are the pros and cons of co-location. So does it actually cut costs? Is it helpful for individuals to engage with other conferences outside their area? Do people end up doing that? So ACM has a model that they use every 4 years. They have a bunch of different conferences in one location. It's called the FCRC. And I don't know what FCRC stands for. I think F stands for federated and some C stands for conferences. But you can just Google that, ACM FCRC, and that will show you that there's, these 10 or 11 conferences across different SIGs that try to co-locate in 2019 and 2023. And I also have the post-conference survey results now from those. I was looking through those. Most of the feedback was really about the food, which was interesting because people do care about food and maybe they have different standards for food. But it seems like people were happy to be in a place where they could also touch other conferences. So that might be something to consider for some of you here. And number 4 was volunteering, which mostly got covered under peer review and conferences, but it was about volunteering burdens. Certainly the advantage of co-location, I was told the number 1 advantage was reduced volunteering burden. So that's something to consider if that might help with conference organization. And then there's early careers. So just today we had a question from someone in the community asking, what are the member benefits? Why should I be a SIGCHI member if I'm a student or an early career scholar? And that's a really good question, right? And I was thinking we do offer some benefits in terms of Grammarly and reduced conference rates and such, but I think this is something that we could be much more intentional about. So I was speaking also with our VP membership to maybe do a survey this year. So last year we had done a more general membership survey, but this year maybe focusing on our students in early careers and what should we be trying to offer in terms of membership benefits. So those are the 5 areas that we listed at the end of the summit. The 6th that I mentioned was basically around transparency and participation around these, so just creating spaces for people to be involved. And we did create those spaces, at least in the Slack workspace that we have from the summit. So there are 5 channels for each of these. And really, it's not just for people who were at the summit. If there are any of you who want to be in any of those channels and want to contribute, by all means, you can just drop me a line, or you can say so in the chat, and I can add you. And the plan for these conversations is basically to develop these further. We have about 2 months till Kai, and then do a panel at Kai where we will bring these up with the larger community, hopefully, and talk about where we're at and what are the types of things that we want to be doing. So whether it's developing guidelines, whether it's developing resources for conferences to talk to each other about all of those. So that brings me to the end of my talking points, but we have time to do a discussion. So maybe we can stop sharing, Luigi, so we can just open it up for questions and discussion. Thank you. And I'm just taking a look at the comments. So, oh, thank you for sharing the link to the ACM Open post. Also, okay, Margaret, been involved in several co-located conferences. If done well, they can be financially beneficial to everyone, but often not done that well, then it's more work for conference organizers with no financial benefit. Yeah, that's exactly what I was hearing from Donna Capo yesterday, who's, in charge of, like, knows all the conferences like the back of her hand, across ACM. And what she was saying was that I was most interested in cost cutting financially. And so that's what why I had brought this up. And we had a 4-way discussion about it with one of the previous chairs of FCRC. And what they said repeatedly was that financially it's a little bit hard to say, but it could be just a good conference experience. It can be a more enjoyable conference experience. And there's usually the model that they've had is that one of the conference chairs will become kind of the general chair for the entire conference, and then the others become the smaller events. So if you look at TLDI.org, they've also done something similar. And I think yesterday, Luigi also mentioned UbiComp has that, right? With
The International Symposium on Wearable Computing,
yeah.
ISWC. They are together since several years now. Yeah, but there are many examples in ACM, like Splash is another example.
Yeah, Margaret.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit, I've also seen it where there isn't like a flagship conference, but instead the conferences are more like peers. And just in a nutshell, the thing that seems to make it work really well is if each conference works really hard to support the other one. And so if they are, each time they promote their own conference, they're also promoting the other one. And they have things like shared doctoral consortia and shared keynotes and that sort of thing, then and big discounts for attending more than one, not just teeny little ones, then what they've seen is big increases in attendees, which turns into money for them, and small decreases in cost. And then but it all has to be done well in advance so that potential attendees can plan which papers to submit. And so if any of these little pieces aren't managed right, then it's just more work.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yes, so sharing keynotes is definitely something that FCRC did, I think, last year. I did ask Donna, so when should conferences start planning this? And that was 2 years in advance, she said. Also, there's a sweet spot apparently. So when you have roughly 700 total participants, that seems to be the sweet spot for co-location. If it gets too big, then you end up in the convention center, but at 700, you can still do it in a hotel. So anyway, I can go into more details if any of the conference chairs here would like to know, or steering committee chairs, actually. Okay, and then feel the SIGCHI membership brings me more than the ACM membership. It's just that I haven't heard about that in my earlier days. Do you want to say more, Anke? And now there's another question. So let me actually answer this. So who's deciding on co-location? It should be the steering committee chairs. Top as in SIGCHI. So we don't tell conferences what to do. But we can create, resources or just information regards to what they could do. So even just presenting co-location as an option may be something that people only consider after they know what that would be like to them, right? So that's really my goal here, at least in having this conversation with the other ACM folks, was to know, okay, what would it look like for people to consider co-locating? Just to know from people who've done it before. Yeah, it might pay off actually with even fewer attendees. I think it was more what Donna was trying to say was that if you have too many, then it's anyway, this is probably, it changes from location to location and conferences to conference, and we can talk about that if anyone wants to. I imagine also at the steering committee chair level, this would, because you need to plan 2 years in advance, so you may not already have your general chairs by that point. And so you may be thinking about who to recruit where. I know that there's a couple of conferences that talked about this at the summit. So I believe CSCW and VRST are thinking, or at least have been talking about co-locating. Once we brought this up at the summit, we'll see. And nothing is decided, by the way, since this is being recorded. I just want to say that these conversations came up at the summit, and it was nice to see that people were open to considering it. What else? Yeah, Anke?
Not really about this co-location thing, but because I'm one of the hybrid chairs for CRI 1025, I was just curious if there's like an agreement that we stick to trying hybrid. I know that there are different levels of hybrid, but I was just wondering what the opinion is.
You said Chi 25?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there was a discussion about this at the summit, right? Were you there for that?
No, that's why I'm asking. I haven't been there. We just had a meeting with the, I think, SIGCHI Care, or there's the hybrid work group, but we just had the care people attending the session we had. So we don't have like a grasp on if there are any decisions, what the discussions were like. Because like I know that hybrid is like an extra amount of work and money, of course. But we just agreed basically from our perspective that's like very inclusive. But I feel like you said that many conferences just opt out of hybrid because it's just expensive and so much work. So I was just wondering if they're like how the discussions looked like, this agreement or not.
Okay, so that's literally $1 million question, actually. Right. So let's talk about that. I will say that many conferences have said that they don't want to do hybrid because of the cost, because of the volunteer burden, because it doesn't seem to pay off as much. Also, there are other conferences that are very intent on keeping some form of hybrid because they feel it's important for people to be able to attend. I think it's a question about values to some degree, values in terms of what room you have to spend on, and then also what you'd like to invest your volunteer resources on. And if you see, for example, a conference like SIG Access, they are very clear that they want to keep hybrid going because they feel that this is something that their attendees appreciate, because for them, it makes it easier to attend conferences, right? So it's, if you think about attendees, there's many different stakeholders. So there's obviously, there's the chairs, there's the organizers, there's the participants. There are people who wouldn't come if you didn't have a hybrid option. So I think it comes down to values in terms of who you want to consider. Not even prioritize, because I don't think that the in-person participants are not going to be prioritized, right? But it's a question of what you're able to and willing to consider. We don't require hybrid of any of our conferences. We don't require anything, as I said, except that maybe don't lose money, but we don't really tell conferences what to do. But we do try to offer guidelines and support where we can, in terms of hybrid, in terms of accessibility, in terms of sustainability, in terms of equity more broadly. Hybrid as well, there's a resource that Catherine Gerling, our hybrid chair, had shared at the conference, which may not work for Kai because that's too big. But it's what I can share with you all, and I've been speaking with Naomi as well, I can share all the responses I got from the other conferences at ACM. And also, I think what you mentioned, the hybrid working group, maybe Michael Mueller was the CARES representative, although he was not representing CARES, he's representing the hybrid working group there. But he's certainly one of the folks who's been supporting and doing work to support hybrid for some time. You can, and we had a good discussion about it at the summit. I think there's a document that, you know, if you're part of the shared folder, you'll see access to that. There's a, that was a breakout session that we had discussion on. And it's a toss-up, but I think they're trying to figure it out. So maybe offering hybrid partially. Maybe the more critical thing, though, honestly, is to set expectations appropriately. So having people come to the conference or pay for the conference and then find out that they're not going to get what they were thinking they would get, that's, I think, the most disappointing of all. I don't know if anyone else would like to share from their conference experience here about hybrid. Minha, I saw that you have a...
Oh yeah, but I mean, on the hybrid aspect, I think we went with it for KUI last year, but I think so much depends just on the local context, and I think others from KUI also discussed this probably at the Future Summit, that some institutions just can't deliver hybrid, right? And so much of it is very dependent on the location, context, what kind of tech support you have, right? You can hire a team from wherever, but it doesn't necessarily, you know, work well with the local setup, right? So it just takes a very long time to figure out all the details. At least that's what we found out. It worked. We had great support internally as well as the external company we hired, but it was definitely a gamble. So very curious to see how it will be for other bigger conferences.
I feel the size has an impact on it. Like I think I was at KaiPlay for like 2 years now, which we did hybrid. We had a lot of effort, but I think in the end the experience was well, but it's like a single track conference. If you compare that to Kai, no way. But yeah, it's a size. And then it's not to say, yeah, it's like managing the expectations. I think that's really important. But thank you for the summary.
Yeah, I think we were trying to manage expectations also at the summit. We had, I guess, it was like a small conference, right? Or most of our conferences are actually in that range, so about 150. But Alexander, I'm wondering if you'd like to share from the participants' perspective how the summit was for you, for example, because you were there almost throughout.
Yeah, well, I was the hybrid member. So to say, well, the summit itself was great, although as always, hybrid is not the same as being there. but I was part of this hybrid team that were talking about hybrid. And I'm a little bit the advocate of, so that there was one conference having it purely online one year and purely on-site the other year. And I kind of like that setup, because with hybrid, you always lose something. And my approach here would be, why do we make hybrid? Why do we try to make conferences for online people similar to the conference? There might be so many benefits if you're purely online, if everybody is online as well. So you might really think about the benefits of both areas and not try to necessarily combine these two things, whatever it costs, because there is always a backdraw, then there are always some negative effects. So I guess that's something I got out of that. Second, it's all about preparation and technology in that sense. So things needs to be prepared then twice, because it's not the same setup. So for the summit itself, these breakout rooms did not work as well as for you guys being there, being physically there, because well, some of the things couldn't be done online, or they would have been prepared in a different way in advance. But of course, that bears some other problems. But the summit itself was great. I would appreciate if these kind of summits could be more often. I don't know if this is actually the case, or if summit-like thing could be co-located or co-hosted with some of the bigger conferences, like for Kai. I could imagine that if some people are there, then that might be good. And on the other hand, so I'm not traveling to Hawaii this year, not only because I don't have a full paper, but it's okay for me. I don't need to be at every Kai conference. So that's, I don't think that everybody needs to be at every conference all the time. Well, that's my 5 minutes on the hybrid setup.
Super important thoughts to share, though. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Not everyone needs to be at every conference. And thanks for sharing about your experience with the hybrid. I think on the topic of summits, so at Kai, we will do a summit meetup. So whoever is, still engaged on these different conversations, would like them to come together. And, we've been talking about the summit from before the pandemics, as in the previous EC, and we've mentioned that there was going to be kind of a peer review focused event at that time. But then it felt like we just needed, especially with, as I mentioned, conferences losing money, and we felt like it's really important to get us all together. And hopefully that would invigorate the different conferences and also create channels for communicating again across conferences. So the hope is definitely that this will happen at a semi-regular, like not every year for sure, but I don't know, we'll see with future governance, but maybe a couple of years, or maybe at least once in 3 years. But this is probably the event that that I feel like in the last 3 years, or since the pandemic, that I have seen that really brought people together talking about SIGCHI. So it was great from that angle. And yeah, so Matt, this is a question for you. When is the summit meetup happening at Kai? This is like the lunch, right, that we had for the conferences?
Excuse me, at lunch, I'm eating a bit of my lunch. Yes, so we have it scheduled physically, the physical one, on the lunch on the Thursday of Kai. So there'll be comments about that when it's been confirmed, but that's the request we put into the executive event to help us run. So there will be a lunchtime event where we'll be reflecting on everything we've learned in the summit, and then working out how to take it forward.
Yeah, so if you're going to be at Kai, and if you've been involved in these conversations, then definitely join us. We have 4 minutes. Anything else that anyone would like to bring up? Is there anyone here who's not on Slack but would like to be added?
Yeah, that's me. I'm quite new.
Can I please ask you to send me a line just with your email address and which of these 5 conversations you'd like to be a part of, and I'll add you.
All right, I will do so.
Thank you.
And welcome, Azim. Nice to see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Glad you could join.
but actually, I registered just last month.
Oh, yeah.
I was able to hear about SIGCHI from David Lamas, who is a professor at Tallinn University in Estonia of human computer.
Yeah, well, it's really good to have you, and thanks for giving up your time to join and be part of the community.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation, by the way, because listening to my seniors in the industry is like something very inspiring for me. So I hope to do more of this and probably even contribute to the whole SIGCHI way better than I expect myself to.
Thank you. We'll have another meeting, by the way, in a month, and we will not talk about the budget. We will only talk about the summit there, so it will be only happy.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, so do join us, and we'll do 2 sessions. So we've now figured out, thanks to Keith, that we'll do one in people's mornings and one in people's evenings, and hopefully that works out to make sure that everyone has a decent time at which they can join.
All right. Yes, I've sent you my email. Perfectly, so you can add me to the Slack.
Thank you. I will make a note of this. And Adrian, I think we'll be meeting about the site selection stuff. That's also connected with conferences. So maybe I add you to the conferences channel.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you. And then there was also a conversation about awards, which actually Nicholas already blogged about. So you might have read that. That was a more recent blog post on our Medium about what we're thinking about new awards and such. Okay, bye everybody. I will stop recording now. It was wonderful to see you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.